Thank you very much, Your Worship, and what a crowd. This is a remarkable sign of the huge momentum in the vision of the industrial heartland. I'd like to begin as well by acknowledging the death of our late Sovereign Queen Elizabeth II. This is an official period of mourning, and in fact, I'll be leaving from here to go to a meeting of the Cabinet and Executive Council where we will formally proclaim recognition of King Charles III as the King of Canada. We'll be holding tributes in Alberta's legislature to the late Queen later today, and next Monday, concurrent with the funeral in London, will be an official day of mourning here in Alberta. And I'd like to encourage all of you, your businesses, governments, and organizations to find some way of marking 7 remarkable decades of selfless service. Well, thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you for being here in such large numbers to celebrate the remarkable success of what began as an unlikely vision several years ago about renewing the Edmonton region as one of the key economic and industrial hubs, not just of Canada, but of North America. I remember first meeting the Industrial Heartland Association in offices east of here, back when I was Alberta's opposition leader in 2018. And I was struck with the audacity of the vision that businesses, local governments, citizens, and other organizations had developed for deep and lasting economic renewal. To harness Alberta's enormous natural resource wealth, to apply our remarkable ingenuity and technology to create products in demand around the world, all the while creating thousands of jobs and diversifying Alberta's economy. And I got to tell you, when you're in my kind of job, you hear a lot of different ideas and demands and requests and a lot of different lobbying. But when what gets my attention, I think that this is true for most leaders in government, is when people propose solutions. Not just describing problems, but practical, concrete, well-thought-out solutions. And that's what I encountered when I first met with the Industrial Heartland Association 5 years ago. And several of the solutions that were proposed to me went straight in to the election platform for my party in the 2019 provincial election. Ideas like the creation of designated industrial zones. Ideas like granting local municipalities the ability to grant property tax relief to attract major new capital investment. And ideas like a revised and expanded petrochemical incentive program and much more, all of which became key planks in a platform completely focused on economic growth, on jobs, the economy, and on pipelines. And I am pleased to report to you that all of those commitments have been kept by Alberta's government. But when I first met with this group in much smaller numbers 5 years ago, we were in the midst of a prolonged economic decline in Alberta. Let's be honest about it. Our GDP had gone from $360 billion, the second largest in Canada, down at the bottom to $320 billion, falling behind Quebec for the first time in our modern history. Tens of thousands of people had lost their jobs. We were seeing unprecedented high unemployment, particularly amongst younger workers. People were leaving the province more than were coming here, and tens of billions of dollars, about $80 billion of capital, fled the province during that period. Some of it had to do with bad commodity prices, but a lot of it also had to do with bad government policy. And so we were determined to at least fix the policy problem. And that's exactly what we set about doing with the job creation tax cut to lower Alberta's business tax rate from 12% to 8% by 1/3. We accelerated that at the bottom of the COVID trough in the summer of 2020. And that gave us bragging rights with by far the lowest business taxes in Canada, lower than all of the US states save 5 when you combine federal, provincial, and state taxes. Let me tell you right off the top, I went to the Global Business Forum in Banff 3 years ago this week and met with the top leadership of Dow, who are represented, of course, here. And earlier that summer at the Global Petroleum Show in Calgary, met with top executives from Middle Eastern petrochemical companies. And the very first thing that they said to me in both instances was that Alberta's corporate tax cuts were getting us in the game. They were making us competitive. And I started to learn what I already intuited, what I kind of deeply suspected, which is that when it comes to competing for major capital investments of that nature, big global companies can invest anywhere. They can invest their shareholders' capital anywhere. And they are looking to maximize returns with the lowest possible overall costs and best returns. And so it was critical that we get in that race, and the 1/3 cut in the business tax rate was a huge part of it, as was our renewed and expanded Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, which took us further in being competitive. As was the legislation we passed in the spring of 2019 to give municipalities the power to compete for big investment with local property tax breaks. Now, I'll be honest with you. There were more than a few municipalities and voices in the legislature who were complaining about this. They called it a race to the bottom. I say, since when are Albertans afraid of competition? Competition is a race to the top. And I want to salute the municipalities here, including those in the Heartland, who proposed this idea, who have used these municipal property tax incentives, and I can see what a difference maker it is right across the province, not just in petchems east of here. Next week, I'll be announcing a very exciting, huge new manufacturing project in a rural municipality near Calgary that will be a game changer for an industry, and part of that started with the municipal property tax breaks. I flew down to Houston, spent a whole day there, actually 2 days, with folks from Dow back in the fall of 2019 to really push all of these issues and see what more we could do to clear out any obstacles to landing the major investment that we know is coming. And I remember Jack Brodo, the head of upstream for Dow, said to me, you know, we really appreciate that property tax break, but the problem is that it doesn't apply to machinery and equipment. So I picked up my phone right there at the Dow headquarters in Houston. I called our Minister of Municipal Affairs. I said, apparently there was an oversight in our legislation. The ledge is in session. Please draft and introduce an amendment to the Municipal Government Act to apply those property tax breaks to M&A and get it through the legislature as quickly as possible. It was passed into law in 5 days. The point wasn't just that we were expanding that tax break. The point was we were demonstrating to a major global investor how responsive we are. And in fact, Jim Fitterling, the global CEO, has told that story on American business media. It's part of what we did in creating the Invest Alberta agency, to tell Alberta's amazing story about one of the most competitive places in the world to global capital markets. And with so many other policies, we now see Alberta leading Canada in economic growth. This quarter, we will finally, fully have recovered from where our economy was at the end of 2014, despite the catastrophe of the COVID global recession and the collapse of energy prices. We are leading the country in job creation. We've seen over 200,000 net new jobs created since the beginning of last year. We now see Alberta leading the country once again in population growth, reinforcing our bragging rights as having the youngest population in the country. None of this happened by accident. Yes, commodity prices have helped, but although I'll tell you the truth, only a small percentage of those new jobs have come out of primary oil and gas because they're not doing a lot of new greenfield capex. Most of that has come through new industries, like huge growth in IT, in film and television, exports in manufacturing, in, of course, the agriculture, which last year had record yields and will again this year, and so much more. Policies like, for example, the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, where we put $1 billion of the faith and credit of the Alberta Crown behind First Nations seeking an ownership stake, not token benefit agreements, but a real ownership stake in resource projects to develop the resources that lie below the grounds that their ancestors first inhabited. The red tape reduction strategy. Alberta's government in the last 3 years has eliminated over 1/3 of the province's regulatory burden. Over 200,000 regulations have been eliminated. Approvals have been accelerated right across the board. There is more work to do, and this is a challenge to you as an association and individually, as businesses and governments. Please let us know what more we can do to get dumb government regulations out of the way of investment and economic growth. But we've gone from an F to an A under the Canadian Federation of Independent Business report card on red tape. We are now, we started 3 years ago as the province with the most restrictions on internal trade across Canada, believe it or not. And now we are by far the freest trading province. According to the CFIB again, we are rated the best in the country. We went from 10th to 2nd on red tape. We went from 10th to 1st on free trade, eliminating 90% of our restrictions on interprovincial trade. We passed the Labor Mobility Act to basically grant automatic certification in the Alberta labor market for regulated professionals who move here. We created the Skills for Jobs program. I'll tell you, one of the first things that Dow and others said to me when we started this work in 2019 was they were concerned about the availability of labor if multiple major projects went forward at the same time. And we all know that perhaps one of the biggest emerging challenges for Alberta business is skill and labor shortages. And that's why we are retooling the education system to focus more on practical, experiential learning, like apprenticeships in the trades, because we need young people to realize that a trade certificate, a journeyman ticket, has every bit as much value, merit, and worth as a university degree, and that experiential on-the-job learning is just as valuable as academic classroom learning. And we're retooling our funding scheme for post-secondary institutions to make that point clear, that we want to pay for outcomes in the labor market that lead to fulfilling lifetime careers and vocations. But for all the exciting stuff that's happening, I mean, they've only given me 10 minutes, I'm already over time. I could go on about just the film and television stuff. That stuff's pretty fun. I mean, we got the largest film shot going on in Canadian history right now, the HBO blockbuster $600 billion 5-year series, The Last of Us. Some of you have probably run into their production going on. It's a zombie apocalypse movie, so kind of suitable for the COVID era. So that's kind of fun. But you know what the big ticket is? The real big game changer, which is going to change Alberta's economy forever, and the Canadian economy, well, it's right in this room. It is your vision of the industrial heartland, and it is the vision of bringing together our huge natural resources, our abundant natural gas in particular, which is massively underpriced, and hence we're attractive for investors. It's about harnessing that, applying technology and innovation to move us up by orders of magnitude in the production of in-demand petrochemicals and low and zero emitting projects, and linked to that, making this part of Alberta truly one of the key global hubs in the future multi-trillion-dollar hydrogen industry, and connected to both of those things. Taking Alberta's early, pioneering, bold leadership on carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and again, making us truly a global center of excellence. All of these things fitting together. We need Albertans to understand that we are on the cusp of what I call a new industrial revolution for Alberta. We have already landed $18 billion of announced petchem projects, and I really want to give a particular shout out to Dow for the confidence that they have expressed in this province to build the world's first net zero emitting ethane cracker. And so many other projects. I don't want to pick favorites by just mentioning some companies, but that's a biggie. So 18 billion. Now, our natural gas strategy and our hydrogen roadmap envision $30 billion of petchem capex in the balance of this decade. So we are hot on the tracks of that other $12 billion. By the end of this decade, we will see shovels in the ground, building, I believe, at least $30 billion worth of projects. And then in hydrogen, we're talking about, so far we've attracted $12 billion of announced projects, and that is just skimming the surface. All of this linking in the low-emitting petchems and the low-emitting hydrogen, all of it creating long-term, decades-long demand for natural gas, which means good upstream, blue-collar, drilling, exploration and production jobs. It means midstream jobs for pipeliners. It means service jobs for contractors all across rural Alberta. It means, yes, a strong future for our largest and historic industry, feeding into these new projects. The hydrogen, well, as I say, we've attracted $12 billion, but our goal there, again, is at least $30 billion by the end of this decade. And I just came back from an investment trip in Korea. That's all they want to talk about. More and more capital will be coming here. And all of it linked in to CCUS, which is why we accelerated our assignment of pore space through the tendering process for the industrial heartland. We're now doing it for the rest of the province. And with the Pathways Group, they're targeting, on behalf of the oil sands producers alone, $30 billion in capital investment in CCUS. We have, according to the Boston Consulting Group, the second best geology in the world for CCS. We fought hard to get that 50% investment tax credit from the federal government, and we hope they'll expand it to match the 45Q investment tax credit in the United States. Here's my point. You bring all three of these things together, the huge future in petrochemicals, in hydrogen, linked into CCUS, supporting natural gas. And to those who are anxious about whether Alberta is diversifying, the answer is this. We have Edmonton is the fastest growing IT sector in North America. Calgary was just voted by The Economist the highest standard of living in the Western Hemisphere, the third highest in the world. Fastest growing film and television sector in North America. But all of that will pale in comparison to the huge industrial developments that you are leading here in partnership with Alberta's government. We're so excited. There are challenges, immediate challenge of the stagflationary environment in the global economy, but usually commodity-based regions do relatively well in those situations. The challenge of a federal approvals process that creates uncertainty and unnecessary delays, and that is exactly why we kept our commitment to sue the federal government on the constitutionality of the Bill C-69 Impact Assessment Act. And we won an historic victory at the appeal court, a 4-1 decisive victory, and we got the support of all 9 other Canadian provinces on the way to the appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada in what will be perhaps the most important judicial decision in the history of the Federation on the division of powers and for our economy. I encourage industry associations here to file amicus curiae briefs in support of Alberta's challenge of what I call No More Pipelines law. The challenge of the federal plastics regulations. Inexplicably, using criminal law authority to list plastics, inert plastics, as toxins like arsenic. It makes no sense. I want to salute the Chemical Association, a number of the companies for challenging that, and last week Alberta entered the fight to support them at the federal court. And then finally, we have the challenge of labor and skills in the future. But we got the youngest population, we got the best educated, we got the highest incidence of STEM disciplines. We're retooling the education system to align it with future labor market demand. And, oh, by the way, you can actually afford to own a home in Alberta. Have you seen our Alberta is Calling campaign? Focused on Vancouver and Toronto. The message is, and this is, I want any of you who are prospective investors who are concerned about labor, think about this, at least in the Canadian context. Who in the world, as an immigrant, as a migrant, as a future worker, could afford to go and set up in Vancouver or Toronto, where a detached house costs $1.2 million versus $360,000 in Edmonton, or $400,000 in Calgary? We've done the math. You take a $125,000 a year employee from Toronto, move them to Calgary or Edmonton, and they are $400,000 better off after 10 years. So what does that mean? That means we are going to be enjoying dynamic population growth as people come here to actually be able to afford to raise a family. And that means talented workers for the future. I think we've got the solution. I'll be down in Toronto, by the way. We are wrapping the TTC subway stations with Alberta is Calling posters next week. Just stay tuned. Eat your heart out, Toronto. Folks, my point, I'm sorry to take more time than I was supposed to, but you're doing a lot of work, and so is Alberta's government. And it's time that we, after several tough years, and then COVID on top of it, I think it's time that we got a little bit of a jump in our step, a little bit of Alberta pride for what we are achieving together. A lot more work yet to be done, but we are up to those challenges. Thank you for showing Canada the way forward on addressing both our environmental challenges and attracting investments and growth, jobs for decades to come. God bless. Thanks very much.
Premier Kenney, as your time as Premier comes to an end, just want to take a moment and thank you for your service to this country in many different roles, and certainly to this province over the past number of years as well. All the best in what comes next for you. Thank you so much.